don't know. You know, I ain't even know or hear about Duck until like 2012, bro. I ain't gonna lie to you. Like a lot of them over there, Butter, all of them, you know, you done seen them type of niggas. Butter, Lil J, all of them. I seen them before.
Chicago is shaking right now. And I mean that literally. Because Big Mike, Block Big Mike, the man who was there when King Von was still running those streets, the man who caught a 28-year sentence while Von walked free, the man who was exiled from a block after being Von's day one. This man just sat down in front of a camera and said everything that the streets have been whispering about for years. And Chicago has not been the same since. Because Big Mike is not some random blogger. He is not some YouTuber speculating from his bedroom. This is a man who was in the trenches with King Von before Von ever stepped into a recording studio. Before Crazy Story. Before Took Her to the O. Before the Billboard 200 and the Platinum Plaques and the legacy that the whole world is still debating in 2026. Big Mike was there. In the streets. In the courtroom. In the jail cells. Right next to Von when everything that eventually became music was still just real life happening in real time. He watched Von rise. He watched Von fall. And now, for the first time, he is telling the complete truth about all of it. Strap in. Because what Big Mike just revealed changes everything you thought you knew about King Von. Before he was a name that people throw around in comment sections when they are arguing about King Von's legacy, Big Mike was somebody's friend. Somebody's brother. Somebody's day one. And understanding that human reality is the only way to understand why everything he is saying right now carries the weight that it does.
In traffic or whatever, but Duck, I never even seen Duck. You know what I'm saying? I never even heard of Duck until 2012.
How did you know Butter then? Because like they were all coming up on
Butter, you know what I'm saying? Bro and them know who he is, so one day we riding past it, you know what I'm saying, St. Lawrence, that's Butter right there, we out the bound.
Big Mike Michael Wade grew up in and around O'Block, Parkway Gardens, 64th and King Drive on Chicago's South Side. The same streets that produced King Von, the same environment that shaped everything Von eventually rapped about, the same ecosystem of loyalty and danger and survival that became the foundation of one of the most celebrated careers in Chicago drill history. Big Mike was not an outsider looking in at that world. He was inside it, breathing it, living it every single day alongside the people who would eventually become either legends or casualties, and in Chicago's South Side, sometimes both at the same time. And his relationship with King Von goes back further than most people realize. Further than the music. Further than the interviews. Further than any of the public moments that fans have been able to track and document and argue about online. Big Mike has stated clearly that if it was not for him, the world would never have known who King Von was, claiming a pivotal role in shaping Von's rise to fame before anyone outside of Chicago had ever heard his name. Now that is a bold statement. And in the Chicago drill world, where everybody claims proximity to greatness after the fact, a statement like that would normally get dismissed immediately. Except Big Mike can back it up. Because the receipts for his connection to Von are not in interviews or social media posts. They are in court documents. They are in police reports. They are in the legal record of one of the most consequential criminal cases in O'Block history. May 2014. A birthday party in Englewood. And a chain of events that would define the next 6 years of King Von's life before he ever made a single song. Stucky and another man were allegedly giving rude looks in Von's direction. Von left the party, grabbed Big Mike, grabbed a weapon, and returned. Malcolm Stucky, a 19-year-old college student, basketball player, and museum janitor, was shot and killed. Another man was wounded. Let that land for a second. Malcolm Stucky. Not a gang member. Not somebody involved in any beef. A college student who was at the wrong place at the wrong time and whose life was taken before it ever had a chance to become what it could have been. And that fact, the specific humanity of Malcolm Stucky, is something that gets lost almost every single time this story gets told in rap media. Because the focus is always on Von. Always on Big Mike. Always on what happened to them legally and professionally afterward. And almost never on the 19-year-old young man who never came home from that birthday party.
You know what I'm saying?
Like, telling you there go
Yeah,
Butter.
like that's
So Butter was like sliding and doing shit early on type shit for y'all to like to know him.
I mean, I don't know if he was really sliding, but his name was, you know what I'm saying, out there as one of them people from off St. Lawrence. You know what I'm saying? Butter. You feel me?
I saw a comment on.
After the shooting, Big Mike agreed to testify against Vaughn and gave a full statement to police, explaining that he and Vaughn had chased the victims down, that Big Mike shot one man in the foot, and that Vaughn shot the other. So the case against King Vaughn was built on Big Mike's cooperation, built on his statement, built on his promise to stand up in open court and tell a jury exactly what happened that afternoon in Englewood. And prosecutors believed they had an airtight case. A cooperating witness who was present. Physical evidence. Multiple corroborating details. This was supposed to be straightforward. And then Big Mike changed his mind. Big Mike withdrew his promise to testify against Vaughn. Other witnesses did not show up, and the case collapsed. Vaughn was acquitted of all charges in December 2017 after spending over 3 years in Cook County Jail awaiting trial. 3 years. Vaughn sat in that jail from 2014 to 2017. 3 years of his young life, 3 years of his 20s, 3 years that would have broken most people, and came out the other side walking free because the man who was supposed to put him away decided at the last moment that he could not do it. But here is the part that the internet has been arguing about ever since. Because Big Mike recanted his testimony and refused to point Vaughn out at trial, he was convicted of aggravated battery with a firearm and sentenced to 28 years in prison. 28 years. For choosing loyalty over cooperation. For making a decision in a courthouse that cost him nearly 3 decades of his freedom. And what did King Vaughn do after walking out of that courtroom a free man? He went into a recording studio. He made Beat That Body with THF Zoo, a song that many people read as a direct reference to beating his murder case. He began building the career that would eventually make him one of the most celebrated voices in Chicago drill history. While Big Mike sat in a prison cell serving a sentence that existed in direct relationship to the decision he made to protect Vaughn. Now here is where the story gets even more complicated. Because the streets, and now Big Mike himself in these interviews, have been going back and forth on a question that cuts right to the core of everything. There are claims circulating that King Vaughn was actually the one who gave information to police about Big Mike, not the other way around. That the narrative of Big Mike snitching on Vaughn and then recanting is only one version of a much more complicated story. And Big Mike has addressed this directly in recent interviews, carefully, deliberately, with the kind of precision that comes from a man who has had years to think about exactly what he wants to say and how he wants to say it. Big Mike has also addressed King Vaughn's song Why He Told, which the public widely believed was Vaughn throwing shade at Big Mike about the murder case. Big Mike denied that the song was about him, which raises its own questions. Because if the song was not about Big Mike, then who was it about? And why did Vaughn feel the need to make a song with that specific title at that specific moment in his career, if not to address the most publicly known situation in which somebody from his circle was accused of cooperating with authorities? These are the questions that Big Mike's recent interviews have blown wide open. And Chicago, the streets, the fans, the people who were actually present for all of this, has erupted in response. Because Big Mike is not speaking in generalities. He is not doing the diplomatic dance that most people do when they sit down for interviews about situations this serious. He is going specific. He is naming moments. He is describing dynamics. He is talking about what it actually felt like to be inside the O-Block ecosystem when all of this was happening. And the picture he is painting is so much more layered and so much more human and so much more complicated than anything the blogs have ever given you. Everything about Vaughn. Everything about O-Block. Everything about the web of loyalty and betrayal and survival that defined those streets during the years when King Vaughn was becoming King Vaughn. Wooski. Big Mike's brother. Blood. The person who Big Mike grew up with, who he would have done anything for, who represented the most fundamental loyalty that exists, the loyalty of family. And Wooski, through a series of events that Big Mike has described in painful detail across multiple interviews, ended up on the opposite side of everything. Big Mike revealed the full story of how his brother Wooski left O-Block and became one of their top ops. He also spoke about what it was like living with Wooski, who was from his main op hood and would have his friends over, including FBG Butta, FBG Young, FBG Dutchie, and KI, people who were enemies of O-Block coming through the same house. Sit with that image for a moment. Big Mike, connected to O-Block, connected to King Von, connected to everything that O-Block represented in terms of loyalty and Block solidarity. Living in a space where his brother was regularly bringing over people who were on the complete opposite side of that world. People whose presence in that house represented a fundamental violation of the street code that O-Block operated by. And Big Mike was caught directly in the middle of it. Not by choice. Not because he wanted to be in that position. But because Wooski was his brother, and blood does not stop being blood just because the block demands it. And King Von, who operated in a world where ambiguity was not an option, where you were either with O-Block or against it, where the middle ground was the most dangerous place you could stand, saw Big Mike's position as a problem. Big Mike explained in detail that King Von and Wooski were each other's absolute top ops, that Von was actively hunting Wooski, making their rivalry one of the most dangerous personal beefs in Chicago drill history. So here is the impossible math that Big Mike was living with. His brother was Von's top op. Von was his friend, or had been. And O-Block, which was his community, his home, his identity, was aligned with Von against everything Wooski represented. There was no version of that situation that ended cleanly for Big Mike. There was no move he could make that satisfied everyone. And eventually O-Block made the decision for him. Big Mike revealed that he was exiled from O-Block after King Von got out of jail, specifically so that O-Block could move against Wooski without Big Mike being caught in the crossfire of his own loyalty. His presence complicated their ability to do what they felt needed to be done. So they removed him. Not violently. Not with confrontation. But with the kind of quiet exclusion that is in some ways more devastating than anything physical. Because it tells you that the community you built your entire identity around has decided that you no longer belong in it. And Big Mike has spoken about how that felt. About what it means to be exiled from the only world you ever knew. About carrying that rejection alongside the 28-year sentence that he was already serving. About being locked up, cut off, and watching from a distance as the friend whose freedom he had protected with his own testimony built a career that the whole world fell in love with. Now let us talk about what Big Mike says about Von the person. Because this is the part that fans need to hear. Because the Von that Big Mike describes in these interviews is not the simplified version that the internet has constructed. He is not just the street figure. He is not just the serial killer label that Trap Lore Raw supplied. He is not just the beloved artist that fans have turned into a martyr. He is a complicated, fully human, deeply contradictory person who is simultaneously capable of extraordinary loyalty and extraordinary violence, sometimes in the same breath. Big Mike shared the untold story of his time locked up with King Von, describing how Von let absolutely nothing slide in jail. How the same intensity, the same refusal to back down, the same fearlessness that defined Von on the streets translated directly into how he carried himself when he was incarcerated. In a jail environment where showing weakness even once can define your entire experience, Von apparently never gave anyone that opportunity. Not once. And the men around him, men who had their own reputations, their own histories, their own reasons to be feared, understood immediately that Von was operating on a completely different level. And Big Mike watched all of that. Took mental notes on all of that. Processed all of that through the specific lens of a man who had known Von before the reputation, before the music, before the legend, who knew the version of Von that existed before the world decided who Von was going to be. And then there is the Lil Durk angle. Because Big Mike's recent interviews have not stayed in the past. They have come all the way forward to 2026 and addressed the most current, most consequential chapter of the O-Block story directly. Big Mike reacted to Lil Durk's federal case, including the $70,000 allegations, and addressed the King Von jail calls that prosecutors are now using as evidence in court, calling it one of the most controversial legal stories happening in hip-hop right now. Because here is what makes Durk's case so specifically connected to everything Big Mike has been talking about. The prosecution's theory, that Durk ordered a hit on Quando Rondo in retaliation for Von's death, means that the relationship between Durk and Von, the loyalty that existed between those two men from 2014 onwards, the bond that Big Mike has been describing in these interviews as something real and something deep. All of that is now being presented in a federal courtroom as the motive for an alleged murder for hire conspiracy. The love that Durk had for Von. The grief that followed Von's death. The anger that apparently consumed everyone in that circle in the aftermath of November 6, 2020. All of it is now evidence. All of it is now part of a federal prosecution that could send one of hip-hop's biggest stars to prison for decades. And Big Mike, who knew both of these men, who was present for the beginning of their relationship, who has watched this entire story unfold from a position of painful proximity, is one of the very few people alive who can speak to what all of this actually means from the inside. And the most devastating thing Big Mike has said in all of these interviews, the thing that has Chicago genuinely shaken, the thing that lands differently than anything else he has revealed, is not about the murder case. It is not about Wooski. It is not about the exile from O'Block. It is something much simpler and much more human than any of that. Something about what he felt when he found out King Von was dead. Big Mike, a man who has every reason to be bitter, every reason to be angry, every reason to frame his relationship with King Von entirely through the lens of what went wrong between them, has chosen instead to talk about something that is far more complicated and far more human than bitterness. He has chosen to talk about loss. And that choice, that specific deliberate choice to lead with his humanity rather than his grievances, is what separates Big Mike's interviews from every other piece of content that has been produced about King Von since his death in November 2020. Because everybody else has an angle. Everybody else is selling something. A narrative. A documentary. A brand. A legacy. Big Mike is selling none of that. Big Mike is just sitting in front of a camera and telling the truth about what it felt like to be him, in all of the impossible complexity that involves. He has spoken about finding out that Von was dead. About what that moment felt like for a man who had known Von before the music, who had sacrificed his own freedom in a way that was directly connected to Von's survival, who had been exiled from the community they both came from, and who still, despite all of that, felt the weight of Von's death in a way that surprised even him. Big Mike went in on why his former friend King Von was dissing him and spoke on where their issues stemmed from, before going into how he felt when King Von passed away. And what he described was not relief. There was no indifference. Was not the reaction of a man who had been wronged and was watching karma play out. It was grief. Real grief. The complicated kind that exists when you lose somebody with whom you had unfinished business. Somebody with whom the relationship never got the chance to reach whatever resolution it might have eventually found. And that humanity, that willingness to grieve publicly for a man who dissed him, who he had every reason to resent, who his own brother was on the opposite side of, that is the thing that makes Big Mike's testimony so valuable and so rare. Because it refuses to let King Von be just one thing. It refuses to let the story be simple. It insists on the full picture even when the full picture is painful and contradictory, and does not resolve neatly into the kind of conclusion that satisfies people who want their heroes to be purely heroic and their villains to be purely villainous. Now let us bring this all the way forward to 2026. Because Big Mike's interviews are not just about the past. They are about the present. They are about what all of this history means for where things stand right now, with Lil Durk in federal custody, with Von's murder still officially unsolved, with O'Block having absorbed conviction after conviction after conviction in the years since Von's death, and with the community that produced all of these men still living with the consequences of everything that happened. Big Mike confirmed that anyone who says Lil Durk and King Von did not establish their real relationship in 2014 is lying. That bond was forged years before the music, years before the fame, years before any of the legal situations that have defined both of their stories. And understanding that Durk and Von were not just label mates or collaborators but men who built something real together over nearly a decade, is the only way to understand the depth of what Durk allegedly felt after Von was killed. The only way to understand why prosecutors believe the grief was so consuming that it drove him to allegedly order a murder 2 years after the fact. Because grief at that level, the grief of losing somebody you built your entire career alongside, somebody who represented not just friendship but shared survival, shared sacrifice, shared history that goes back to 2014 Chicago when neither of them were famous and everything was still uncertain, that kind of grief does not follow a rational timeline. It does not get processed and filed away in 30 days. It lives in you. It changes how you see everything. And if Big Mike, a man who had every reason to be estranged from Von, still felt the weight of his death years later, imagine what it felt like for Lil Durk. Big Mike also addressed something broader and more sobering than any of the specific legal situations or personal beefs. He spoke openly about Chicago's negative influence on the youth, A statement that hit differently coming from a man who grew up inside that influence, who lived out its consequences in the most direct and devastating ways possible. Because Big Mike is not speaking as an outsider critiquing a culture he does not understand. He is speaking as somebody who was consumed by it, who paid for it with 28 years of his life, who watched his brother become his enemy and his friend become a legend and his community exile him, all in the name of a set of rules and loyalties that ultimately served nobody's long-term interests. And that is the message underneath all of the specific revelations. Underneath the Malcolm Stuckey case and the recanted testimony and the O'Block exile and the Wooski rivalry and the Durk federal case and the Vaughn jail stories. The message is this, that the system that produces extraordinary music and extraordinary talent in places like O'Block is the same system that destroys the people it produces. That the loyalty which makes these communities so tight and so powerful is the same loyalty that puts people in prison and puts people in the ground. That there is no version of this story, not Vaughn's, not Big Mike's, not Durk's, not Wooski's, that ends without enormous cost. And that the cost is always paid by the people who had the least to begin with. Big Mike is out here talking because he has been through the fire and comes out the other side with something to say. With a perspective that only comes from living inside a story that most people only ever observe from outside. And Chicago, the streets that shaped all of these men, the community that is still processing the ripple effects of everything that happened, is listening, erupting, debating, because what Big Mike is saying challenges everybody. It challenges Vaughn's fans who want a simple hero. It challenges the people who reduced Vaughn to a serial killer label. It challenges the legal system that took 3 years to drop a murder case with no explanation. It challenges everybody who has been comfortable with a simplified version of a story that was never simple. The truth about King Vaughn, the full truth, is still coming out. Piece by piece. Interview by interview. And Big Mike is one of the most important voices in that process. Because he was there. From the very beginning. And he is still here. Still talking. Still refusing to let the comfortable version of the story stand unchallenged. And that is the complete picture that nobody else put together for you today. We went from the Malcolm Stuckey murder case in 2014, where Big Mike's decision to recant his testimony cost him 28 years of his freedom while Vaughn walked free, all the way through the O'Block exile, the Wooski rivalry, the jail stories that prove Vaughn was exactly who his music said he was, the Durk federal case that is still heading toward an August 2026 trial, and finally Big Mike's most human and most powerful revelation, that he genuinely grieved when King Vaughn died despite everything that had happened between them. This is the story that the blogs gave you in fragments, that the commentary channels gave you without context, that the internet argued about without ever sitting with the full weight of what it actually means. Today we gave you the complete version, the human version, the one that respects the complexity of every person involved, including the ones who are no longer here to speak for themselves. So now I need to hear from you. Do you think Big Mike was right to recant his testimony even though it cost him 28 years? Do you think Vaughn's song Why He Told was really about Big Mike, or was it about somebody else entirely? Do you think the relationship between Big Mike and Vaughn could have ever been fully repaired if Vaughn had lived? And do you think Big Mike speaking out now, years after everything, is about truth, about legacy, or about something else entirely? Drop everything in the comments right now because this community goes deep on these conversations and we want your real thoughts, not the safe ones. This is the kind of story that deserves a real discussion, not 30-second takes and hot tweets, but actual engagement with the full picture. If this video gave you something that no other channel gave you, hit that like button right now. Share this with somebody who thinks they already know the King Vaughn story because they have been working with an incomplete version this entire time. The full picture changes everything. And if you are not subscribed yet, you are genuinely missing out on the most thorough, most honest, most complete coverage of the stories that actually matter in this culture. We do not do surface level. We do not do 30-second clips without context. We bring you the full story every single time. Hit subscribe. Hit the bell. Do not miss a single upload. Big Mike is still talking. Durk's trial is coming in August 2026. New developments are dropping every week. And when they do, we will be right here breaking down every single detail for you. Rest in peace to King Vaughn. Rest in peace to Malcolm Stuckey. And to every person whose life was shaped by circumstances that should never have existed in the first place, you deserved better. All of you.